Now, despite me practically being born into Eagles fandom, I didn't really start paying attention to them or any pro football team until like 2003 or '04, due largely to one player that should be obvious at this point. I, like most hood kids, grew up a hooper mainly. And I'm not going to lie, this is due at least in some part to communities like mine not having the resources to finance a Pee Wee or a Pop Warner team, especially when literally all you need to hoop is a ball and some sneakers. Like, you don't even need a hoop, to be honest. That said, football, although not my first, has been my ride or die love since high school. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The evolution of the most important position in that game and arguably in all of pro North American sports. Specifically, I want to talk about the evolution of the black quarterback in today's NFL and how the experience of the black quarterback serves as kind of an allegory for blackness, period, especially black professionalism in America. So yeah, it's going to be that kind of video. So if you are one of those, well, why does it always have to be a race thing with you guys, I suggest you go bitch about it over at Barstool or something. I'm pretty sure you'll find some friends there. Okay, so I'm not going to do a comprehensive history on black quarterbacks because we got enough of those articles and videos last Super Bowl. But I do think it's worth mentioning that black QBs in the pros is about as common as a paternity suit for future these days. This past September was the first time in league history that more than half the opening day starters at quarterback were black. Yes, that includes Dak. That might not matter to some of y'all, and some others like myself probably didn't even realize it until it was pointed out to you. But I think the thing that gets lost in the historicalness of this is that just having more black QBs in the league, and even starting at that, isn't as big a windfall for equity in the league as it may first appear. And I think this is where the parallel with black professionals becomes apparent. More and more black people are gaining access to positions of power in corporate America. There are more black million and billionaires today than ever before. More black faces among the Fortune 500 CEOs, and black women are the most educated demographic in America. Which kind of makes you wonder how Basketball Wives wound up with 10 different spinoffs, but we ain't going there today. However, that being said, the proportion of new black million and billionaires compared to the total population of black America has increased by less than 1% in the last 30 years, while the proportion of white millionaires has increased by 7% in the same time span. Of the Forbes Fortune 500, only 6 of those CEOs are black. And while black women continue to earn more degrees than any other demographic, they still earn 15% and 35% less than their white female and male peers of comparable education, respectively. All of this I've talked about in this video here a few months ago, so if you want the nitty-gritty nasty details, you can go watch that. No, yeah. Go watch it. I'm dead serious, nigga. All the while, college enrollment rates for black men are declining at a rate faster than the incarceration rate is staying steady. In fact, it is more likely that as a black person in America, you will end up poorer as an adult than you were growing up, regardless of your education level, because America. Point being, there's more than meets the eye when it comes to how accessible the American dream actually is for folks like me, especially if we're talking about breaking into that class of super elites that people like Steve Harvey and Jay-Z insist are the key to wholesale black liberation. And that seems to be going swimmingly now, isn't it? It's not. That's the joke. Personally, I think this reality is as visible as it's going to be in professional sports, the NFL especially, where anywhere between 56 and 70% of the players are black, depending on if you count mixed as being black, which it is. Despite this, depending on whose numbers you trust, because I was not going to sit there and actually do the math myself, only about 35 to 40% of coordinators are black, and most of them are defensive coaches. Matter of fact, Todd Bowles, Mike Tomlin, and DeMeco Ryans were the only 3 black head coaches in the league until Gerard Mayo became the 4th, literally the day of this recording. Each of those coaches cut their teeth as defensive coaches, and Mayo, no shade intended, was never elevated beyond a position coach before taking on his newest role. I didn't include Antonio Pierce, who, for y'all who don't know, is currently the interim head coach for the Las Vegas Raiders and probably should get that job at the end of the season. But I mean, this is the Raiders, y'all. The last time they made a good personnel decision, Al Davis was wearing bell bottoms and was alive.
And of course, just like clockwork, like a week after filming, the Raiders did actually give Pierce the job. So there you have it. Can't say it's not deserved.
This might not seem like such a big deal until you learn that as of the 2020 season, 70% of head coaching hires have been from the offensive side of the ball. Currently, there are only 5 black OCs in the league, one of which is more ass than Megan's backside, but this ain't that video. I've actually done several of those on my second channel. Again, go subscribe, nigga. Matter of fact, the Carolina Panthers are currently the only team in a majority black league with both a black offensive and defensive coordinator. Yeah, y'all really not doing us any favors, Carolina. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like part of this isn't just straight up Nepo baby syndrome, but that's kind of the issue, right? There aren't enough black coaches in those positions to just hand out jobs to their knuckleheaded friends and family members to keep the pipeline going. Now, compare that to the NBA, a league where at the start of the 23-24 season, 75% of the player base was black. And yes, we are counting Ben, Book, and every other Kardashian curse recipient as black in this instance. But I'm not going to count Steph, just because I can't stand that nigga. 15, so literally half the head coaches in the NBA are black. 14 are white, and 1 is Eric Spoelstra. That coaching disparity is really what stands out to me, because in a league like the NBA, where the rules have evolved in a way to showcase individual skill and athleticism, strategy is de-emphasized in a way that it's not in pro or even college football. The NFL has also implemented a bunch of changes to encourage those Madden-esque box scores that keep casual fans' attention, thus a greater level of importance being placed on offensive as opposed to defensive strategy by most front offices, and rightfully so, honestly. Point being, if you want one of those shiny head coach positions, your best route is through the offensive side of the ball. But again, there just ain't a whole lot of black OCs in the league to even be in position for one of those jobs. In 1988, famous sports bookie Jimmy the Greek Snyder made his now infamous comments on why black athletes had come to dominate most major American sports. Basically, it was some eugenics BS that's since been disproven multiple times by science and Christian McCaffrey, but the part that people always seem to forget is what he said directly after that quote.
Well, they've got everything. If they take over coaching like everybody wants them to, there's not going to be anything left for the white people. I mean, all the players are black. I mean, the only thing that the whites control is the coaching jobs. Now, I'm not being derogatory about it, but that's all that's left for them.
Black men have historically been shut out of the more intellectually demanding roles in pro-American sports, in this case, coach and quarterback. It's often been stated that aside from certified public accountant, QB is the most important position in all of pro-American sports. For these 2 reasons specifically. 1, it is the most mentally demanding one, which I don't know how that explains Aaron Rodgers. And 2, it's the most visible one in the most popular sports league in the country. Like, how many other team sports can you think of where regular season wins are counted as a metric of individual success?
Oh, that was different.
Thus, a good quarterback has traditionally been thought to be someone who can do 2 things above all else. 1, be smart, again, Aaron Rodgers being the exception, And 2, be a leader. I guess also an exception. 2 things that again was thought to be beyond black men's capacity. And also that of Aaron Rodgers. Again, I'm not going to go through the entire history of black QBs, but it's pretty common knowledge that this was the main reason it took so long to start seeing black faces at the top of the huddle in both the college and pro games. Today, the story is a bit different. It's not so much that black QBs are thought to be dumber than their white peers. It's just that they're perceived to lack the traditional skill set of those peers for reasons I'll get into here and also attempt to debunk. Okay, so according to most old-timey football heads, the main culprit behind the dearth of so-called pro-style quarterbacks in the league, which I mean that phrasing itself is kind of stupid, and again I'll explain why, is because of the offenses that most college and high schools run. Usually some version of spread or read option, or likely some combination of the two. Now, I have a whole, or rather I did have a whole section right here explaining what spread and RPO are, but I know most of y'all really don't care, and I hate you for that. And I am trying to keep y'all's attention as long as possible. So it suffices to say that the reason old-timey football dudes don't like spread and RPO is because they're meant to make the game as easy as possible for the QBs running that system, with the added benefit in RPO that is designed to take advantage of that QB's running ability. The con being that spread and RPO QBs aren't asked to read and diagnose coverages the way that traditional drop back quarterbacks are. Again, this is a super duper simplified explanation, and Brett Coleman would probably murder me if he saw this video. But the point is, because football has always been dominated by old white dudes, anything new and untested is just about always dismissed as a gimmick when it is introduced at the pro level. And the crash and burn of some spread and read option QBs like Tim Tebow, Vince Young, and even RG3 serves somewhat as validation for the football old heads. Point that I'm getting at here is being labeled a spread or a read option quarterback just 10 or so years ago meant you were coming into the league with a scarlet letter, basically. Here's the issue with that logic, though. Once coaches actually remembered that their job was to coach, they started taking prospects with all-world physical talent that may have been a little rough around the edges with the more mentally involved aspects of the game, coaching them up to be the quarterbacks that they had the potential to be all along. Case in point, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Jalen Hurts now being 3 of the best quarterbacks in the league, thanks in no small part to their athletic ability. And yet, 2 of those guys have constantly and consistently had their passing ability questioned, even after one MVP already, and the other would have if not for Soldier Field basically being blacktop in the wintertime. Now, because y'all have humored my football geekery to this point, I won't bore y'all with all the stats that prove Jalen and Lamar are elite passers of the football. Just know that even as we get to the night that Lamar is most likely going to win his 2nd MVP award, there's still people bitching about how he's not quarterbacky enough.
I want my quarterbacks to be quarterbacky. And to me, Lamar Jackson's just a great athlete, and he's done a really good job, and he had a great game against the 49ers. Prisoners of the moment, he is not the MVP.
And even Ben Roethlisberger saying nobody really fears Lamar's arm, apparently.
With Lamar, you want to bring safeties down to help stop the run, because you don't really fear Lamar's arm, his accuracy all the time.
Sure.
He's got a huge arm. He can make things happen when he scrambles and whatever, but you don't fear him just sitting in the pocket and picking you apart.
Sure.
So you can bring safeties down because you do fear him running, because he's a different level runner.
Well, maybe they don't fear his arm as much as women fear leaving their drinks around Ben. My point being, his argument is more BS than his alibis. Ben Roethlisberger is a rapist, if you didn't know. My point being, you don't hear the same level of chirping being made about Allen, or even Dan just can't throw a football to save his life Jones the way you do about Lamar and Jalen. Unless and until the former 2 begin to F up egregiously. Literally all Jalen or Lamar have to do is throw for less than 200 yards in a game, and here comes the Trucker Shades Brigade with their Monday morning QB takes. Matter of fact, in DJ's case, both he and his coach were largely praised for maximizing his athleticism to compensate for his mid at best passing ability. And yeah, we will come back to that a little bit later on. And the only real reason I can think of is because of the prevailing stereotype of black QBs since the 90s, that their game relies more on athleticism than mental capability. So once you take away their legs and their deep ball, you pretty much figured them out. Again, QBs aren't supposed to be athletic according to traditional knowledge. And because we live in a world where Twitter has cooked our collective capacity for critical thought and two things can't possibly be true at the same time, you're either an athletic quarterback or a smart one. And only one of those can be good, despite all the evidence we now have to the contrary. What I'm saying is, in the minds of some fans and even analysts and former pros, there's only one right way to play quarterback, a superior one, if you will. One that has historically been associated with the white boys, or at least from the time that white people gave up on having a chance to just out-athlete their black peers. This is the big reason, in my opinion, why players like Allen and Jones and the soon-to-be added Drake May are praised for utilizing their athletic ability, while Hurts and Jackson are largely critiqued. Or at least they are until they stop running and actually play from the pocket like everybody both demanded of them and said that they couldn't. Then it's them not doing enough to help their teams win when they don't rush for 100 yards in a game. You see where I'm going with this, right?
Clearly, Jalen isn't comfortable reading through a defense in a drop-back pass scenario. Some would say he's not even good at it. And I think that when you look at this team, you have to have a serious conversation if you're Philly. And you have to really say, is it better for us to play Marcus Mariota right now and let Jalen get fully healthy?
When we see Josh Allen or Dan Jones, two white quarterbacks who more fit a stereotypically black play style, we drool over them like Drake does over jailbait. We're just not used to seeing the white boys outrun the Negroes. And that, if we're going to keep it a buck, instills a certain sense of pride in a particular crowd of people, out-blacking the blacks at their own game, if you will. Or at the very least, displaying the ability to perform a task we thought was beyond the white boys due to our misconceptions about white athletes. On the flip side, because we do associate blackness with athleticism, when a black player utilizes that athleticism to succeed playing a position that traditionally doesn't really warrant that, it's alien, it's wrong, it feels like cheating even. There is a right way to play the position, and if you don't or you can't play it that way, it invalidates it, regardless of the efficacy.
Don't call me nigga.
Eldridge Dickey played quarterback for 3 seasons at Tennessee State University, where, along with earning All-American honors all 3 years, he led the team to the Grantland Bowl twice and also led the team to his first undefeated season, along with an HBCU national title that year. He was incredibly gifted as an athlete, being able to throw with both his right and left arms. He also reportedly had a genius level IQ, even though I wasn't able to substantiate that. We'll just chalk that up to rumor. Anyway, my point is all of these attributes led to Dickey being drafted 25th overall by the Oakland Raiders, making him the first black quarterback drafted in the first round of a pro-American football draft. The problem for Dickey was that the Raiders also drafted future Raiders legend and lost member of the Bee Gees, Ken Stabler, in the second round of the same draft. The reason this was an issue was not because Stabler was a better player. Matter of fact, Dickey reportedly outplayed Stabler in that year's camp, but was made to switch to receiver because the Raiders coaches just didn't know how to utilize his skill set properly. Now, Oakland did wind up winning 2 Super Bowls with Stabler, but Dickey still remains one of the league's great what-if stories. And it wasn't even necessarily because he was black. That's the thing. Black quarterbacks were already a thing in the pros for over a decade when Dickey entered the league. The problem with Dickey was that he didn't play the right way, relying as much on his athleticism as his passing ability. Now, maybe you could argue that Stabler was a better fit for their system, but Fran Tarkenton, a future Hall of Famer, largely because of his dual threat ability, was already a 3-time Pro Bowler by the time Dickey and Stabler were drafted. In fact, another future Hall of Famer, Roger Staubach, wound up winning 2 Super Bowls, in part thanks to his running ability. But Tarkenton and Roger are kind of what I'm getting at with Dickey. Unlike today, the two of them were heavily criticized for running so much. But I mean, Roger won 2 Super Bowls despite. Matter of fact, Steve Young would be subject to similar criticism 20 years later and never really outran it until he got the Joe Montana monkey off his back. And this is why even today, Young rides so hard for QBs like Lamar, Hurts, and Allen, but especially Lamar, who gets far and away the most criticism of the 3.
My position is they will never get to championship football without a sophisticated passing game. That's not anything to do with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is a complete player that is being not trained in being a sophisticated passer. They doubled down again back to all the great things that Lamar does. Great. But until he gets the chance to show that he is a sophisticated passer of the football in a sophisticated passing game that is properly invested in, which they never have done, to Robert's point just a minute ago. They don't invest in it. They don't teach it. And now you ask them, why isn't he getting paid to be Patrick Mahomes? Because they haven't given him a chance to be Patrick Mahomes. So until they do, Lamar Jackson's damned because of what the Ravens are doing, not because of Lamar Jackson. I can't wait for someone to train Lamar Jackson in a sophisticated passing game. I think he'd be the greatest player in the history of the game.
Yeah. My point being, the dual threat argument really should have been put to bed in the 70s. And it kind of was, to be honest. That is until the black guys started doing it in the league. The thing about Roger is, even if he played like a nigga, he was still a white boy. Thus, the old heads were willing to live with it because it worked, even if it wasn't the superior style of quarterbacking. Roger and Fran were the exceptions, and perhaps even proof that the white man could still do whatever the blacks could do just as well, if not better, according to some people. But a black dude trying to scramble his way out of reading coverages? Bucko. If you can't play the game the right way, then you're going to switch positions and not play at all. The white way. But even then, black QBs faced an uphill battle just making the league compared to their less accomplished white peers. Sandy Stevens, the first black All-American QB, and Jimmy Ray Jr. both never played a down in the league despite both being national champions. Chuck Ely led Toledo to 35 consecutive wins between 1969 and 71, but like Stevens and Ray before him, never played in the league. Charlie Ward might be the most infamous example, a Heisman Trophy and Maxwell Award winner and national champion in 1993. He refused to accept anything less than a first-round selection in the 94 NFL draft, stating that he would take his talents to the NBA if he weren't, which he did. FYI, the only 2 QBs selected in the first round that year were Heath Schuler and Trent Dilfer. Yeah, exactly. If you're watching this video, then you probably already know who Tony Dungy and Warren Moon are. And if you don't, it's the big-eared nigga who used to coach Peyton Manning and that one dude from that one episode of Martin with Snoop Dogg in it. Dungy was a team MVP at QB in college, and Moon was an MVP of the 78 Rose Bowl and Pac-8 Co-Player of the Year in 1977. And more importantly, eventually did become an NFL Hall of Famer at quarterback. Despite all this, both of those players went undrafted in their respective drafts for the same reason that Ely, Ray, Stevens, and Ward did. They refused to change their positions. Now, Dungy did wind up playing in the league after switching to defense, but Moon didn't get a shot until after he spent 5 years in Canada, becoming Tom Brady of the CFL. Now, I can't really speak on any of the other guys that I mentioned, but I've seen old film of Moon, and he's about a traditional pocket passer as they come. One of the best ever, even. Matter of fact, had he not spent the first 5 of his prime years in America's hat, we'd probably be talking about him in the same breath as Manning, Breeze, or Brady in terms of pure passing acumen. Well, I mean, unless you own a pickup truck with side view mirror extenders, that is.
When I came out in the NFL draft, everybody was saying, we're going to change your position, we're going to change your position, even though I had done all these things in college. It's like, well, what else do I need to do in college in order to just get an opportunity to play the position? Maybe I didn't win the Heisman Trophy or anything like that, but I was a Pac-8 Player of the Year. I was Rose Bowl's most valuable player. I did all the things that you would think at least deserves to get a chance at quarterback. So that was the reason I went to Canada. They gave me a chance to play quarterback. If I would have went up there and failed, then I would have had a decision to make. Am I going to change positions or am I going to move on? The NFL wasn't going to give me that opportunity, so that's why I decided to go to Canada.
The only reason we don't is because a black QB just couldn't get the job done until they got the job done. Moon had to overqualify himself just to get a shot at the big league, where his white peers were given the BOD. This is an eerily similar circumstance that Doug Williams found himself in leading up to the 1978 draft. There's an old adage about the draft that all it takes is one team to fall in love with you. And that's pretty much the story with Williams, who despite being the only quarterback taken in the first round of that draft, only received one pre-draft visit. That from Joe Gibbs, the then offensive coordinator of the Washington No Names, back when they were still the racial slurs. Yes, I'm very aware of the irony, but that's not the point. But as much as we'd love to praise Gibbs for his forward thinking, according to reports, Gibbs spent 2 whole days reviewing playbooks, film, and going through passing drills with Williams before concluding that he was worthy of a first-round selection. Now, again, for those of y'all who don't really know how this works, usually when you invite a guy for a pre-draft visit, you just sort of work him out for an afternoon, take him to dinner afterwards, then review all of the tape and film that you already have on him. But the point is, Gibbs had to be sure that he was sure that this was the guy, because even if the coaching staff didn't have an issue with a black signal caller, I can all but guarantee you that a fan base that cheers for this logo, the first interception that gets thrown, you're going to hear more hard R's than a Celtics game or at Dave Portnoy's house. All that being said, Williams did wind up not only starting but winning a Super Bowl for the team, becoming the first black quarterback to do both those things.
thing I had to say to myself, first of all, I didn't come here with the Washington Redskins as a black quarterback. I came here as the quarterback of the Washington Redskins and to play a football game to win it. Now, whatever happened after that, I can't control anyway. So the most important thing to me was to go out and perform up to my abilities and try to win the football game.
Now, again, no other quarterback was selected in the 78 draft until the second round. It did none after that. But Moon was also in that draft. And remember what happened to him, right? My point being that both Williams and Moon, and honestly every other black quarterback before and since, has had to overqualify themselves in a space where their white peers were given the benefit of the doubt. And that's not just me playing the race card for controversy. One recent study found that black QBs drafted between 2010 and 2022 were chronically underrated compared to their white peers according to draft position. The study found that the average black quarterback was more likely to reach at least one Pro Bowl than non-black peers drafted 66 picks higher. And again, for the non-football watchers, that might not matter a whole lot because, you did make the league after all. But y'all that do watch already know that that's 2 whole rounds to sit around waiting for your name to be called. That's literally millions, if not tens of millions of dollars lost in a matter of a night or two due to nothing else besides implicit bias, which is even wilder when you consider that of the last 10 Super Bowls, not counting this year's, 7 of the starting quarterbacks were not only black, but technically dual threats. In fact, of the last 10 Super Bowl winners, 3 of them were black and 4 were Tom Brady. You see my point now? Both Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes have won Super Bowls thanks in no small part to their dual threat ability. And many in the sport would argue that Jalen Hurts should have been named Super Bowl MVP despite the losing effort. Even in recruiting, the phrases dual threat and pro style are still being used to segregate prospects, despite the fact that, again, dual threat is pro style now. In fact, it has in a lot of ways become the preferred style. The name of the game these days is mobility. We're seeing fewer and fewer Manning and Brady-esque tent poles because defenders are getting faster and pass blocking is essentially a lost recipe now. So if for no other reason than to save your own life, you got to be able to move around a little bit back there. And I mean, if y'all do really want to play the Jamarcus Russell game, for every one of him, I could raise you a Blake Bortles or a Mitch Trubisky or a Zach Wilson. This is all to say, due to historical biases placed against black QBs, even today black quarterbacks in a general sense must overqualify themselves to be trusted with the job. And based on what I just told you, this is only after losing out on potentially millions of dollars that white peers earn based on little more than their potential. Exactly. I've said this multiple times now, but I think the money that pro athletes makes average Dick and Janes like you and I forget the pro part of that. The NFL is still a business, a corporation at that. Thus, logic would dictate that the same issues that black professionals face in literally every other industry is just as, if not even more, applicable in pro sports. And I mean, even if we can't chalk these disparities and opportunities and even compensation up to full-blown clan culture, there is still an implicit bias baked into corporate culture because that anti-blackness that's baked into literally every institution and social structure in our society was never really addressed to begin with. It was just diluted to the point of being acceptable, for lack of better phrasing. Natural black hairstyles like afros, dreadlocks, and bantu knots being deemed unprofessional, even by a lot of black folk. Black people code switching in the presence of their white peers for no reason than because their natural diction is considered out of place in the professional environment. The discomfort our non-black co-workers feel when we speak frankly and openly about black issues. That is, until it proves to be beneficial to those white peers to jump onto the bandwagon. Yeah, I actually do got to give Kenya props for this first season at least. These so-called microaggressions, as they've become known now, are a common component of the black professional's experience. And they all serve one goal, and that is to remind us that you don't really belong here, nigga. So you ought to just be grateful that we threw you a bone in the first place. A chicken bone. But what happens when black professionals, whether by chance or intentionality, go against the grain? They choose to be their true, authentic self in a space defined by conformity. What happens when the black athlete chooses blackness, even at the expense of professionalism or even the profession itself sometimes? From jump, Cam Newton had to answer questions about his character that, to be honest, weren't completely unwarranted considering the laptop fiasco, the cheating thing. But I mean, this is Florida during the Meyer years after all. They were basically the longest yard of 5 stars. Let's be real. To this day, this take from Nolan, let's just say Nazi, is one of the most out of pocket and just downright mean-spirited things for a grown man to say about a college kid.
Newton has a track record as a non-dependable, non-trustworthy, fake rah-rah leader at a very key leadership position. He could really struggle to win a locker room. He projects as a top 15 pick in this year's draft, but he's still very much a project. In 5 years, don't be surprised if he's looking for another job.
Like, I get it, Cam's flamboyance is not for everybody, but exactly how does that make him a dishonest person? Or more importantly, in the context of the reports, a bad football player? We've seen time and again that front offices really couldn't care less about a player's character as long as they can ball. Like Johnny Manziel, another first-round QB with a similarly polarizing personality, with an even greater hunger for the spotlight, if you ask me, was dragged a bit in the draft process, but not in the same way that Cam was, despite Johnny actually having a criminal record dating from before he even played a game at Texas A&M. Matter of fact, Baker Mayfield, who's probably a better comp in personality to Cam, was arrested and charged with public intoxication and fleeing an officer the spring before his final season at Oklahoma. And nary a whisper was made about that leading up to the draft, where he was eventually taken number 1 overall, in part because of his fiery competitive streak. And that's the thing, isn't it? If it's Phillip Rivers dishing out the most PG trash talk you could think of, or Tom Brady scolding his old line like he caught them eating hair grease and doo-doo, or Aaron Rodgers barking at Bears fans that he owns them, or better yet, Mac Jones literally just punching niggas in the dick, that's just their competitive spirit. The drive to win, Mamba mentality. Okay, that's the wrong sport, but you get my point, right? But when it's Cam celebrating after a touchdown, he gets a whole open letter from a butthurt fan about how his pelvic thrust offended her 9-year-old.
The chest puffs, the pelvic thrust, the arrogant struts, and the in-your-face taunting of both the Titans players and fans. We saw it all. I refuse to believe you don't realize you're a role model. You're paid millions of dollars every week to play hard and be a leader. And because you're a role model, your behavior brought out like behavior in the stands. Some of the Panthers fans in our section began taunting the hometown fans. My daughter sensed the change immediately and started asking questions. Won't he get in trouble for doing that? Is he trying to make people mad? Do you think he knows he looks like a spoiled brat?
I don't know about y'all, but this is what I was doing when I was 9. My point being, she's full of dog defecate. That's where I'm getting at. Now, here's the thing about the Newton discourse. I honestly couldn't find a heck of a whole lot of negative discourse surrounding Cam from back in the day, at least not from sports writers. Matter of fact, most of what I found was actually defending Newton from his detractors. So if it's not the media that was trashing Cam...
Hey, who are these niggas? I cried laughing when I read it. You know what I'm saying?
So this leads me to 2 theories now. The first being, it's not the league or the media that's dictating the narrative. It's Tony Two Toes calling into his local sports radio station. It's the armchair football scout quote tweeting every bad ball that one of these guys throws to justify his prejudice. It's the dudes in comments of videos just like these talking out of their afton about the way somebody plays a game that they barely understand beyond man throw ball, man catch ball, man run and score touchdown, yay! Or at least it's a very vocal minority of us who just won't shut up. And the rest of us lacking the cojones to call them out on their anti-black BS. And in the process, we wind up enabling them and giving them a pass to speak for the rest of us who just want to watch man throw ball, man catch ball, run, score, touchdown, yay! On the other hand, maybe it is all by design. It's just manufactured outrage created by the Monday morning media machine for the sake of engagement. But that then begs the question, why though? Okay, so let's go back to Lamar Jackson for a second. So I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of his contract drama because it was like practically half the off-season football content on this website, so y'all can go look at that. But there was a lot of BS circulating in both the traditional and social media around why Lamar was the problem and not the front office that literally had years to get this thing done before it reached critical mass. But again, we got to ask ourselves why. I mean, if you ask me, a big part of it is the fact that Lamar is probably the league's biggest mama's boy. And I mean that in the absolute best way possible. Lamar doesn't have an agent, for those of y'all who don't know. He and his mother handle his financials. No other player of his caliber, let alone a QB, can say that. And in the NFL, that's about as close to player autonomy as you're going to get. So yeah, of course the league is going to spoon feed a narrative to the media to try to turn public opinion against him, if for no other reason than to bully him into taking less money than he's worth, or at least hiring a middleman.
I asked Von Miller last week after the Rams beat the Ravens how Huntley and Jackson compare. And he thinks there still is a gap between the two, because some people are thinking maybe Tyler Huntley can play his way into this job, that maybe, you know, he's a more affordable option and they don't know what's going to happen with Lamar's contract and they can't really get Lamar's attention to engage and negotiate. But here's the reality. He has hurt himself this year by not doing a deal before the season. Now the Ravens are going to be a little more leery, a little more hesitant, and they have a built-in alternative in Tyler Huntley, who has proven himself. The first order of business for Lamar Jackson after this season should be to hire an agent and stop the bleeding, because he's in a lesser bargaining position than he would have been before the season, and he needs to get it turned around.
Not bad for a running back.
Like that whole jazz about he wanting the same kind of structure that Watson got, which proved to be false. But here's the thing. Even if that is what Lamar wanted, Kirk Cousins signed a 4-year fully guaranteed contract with the Vikings back in 2018. And this was after spending every 2 years turning down longer deals and betting on himself. And all anyone talked about was how much of a windfall this was for player empowerment and how it was going to change the way NFL contracts looked forever. Which it didn't, but that's not my point. And listen, Kirk Cousins is one of the just all around just genuinely best guys in the NFL. But he's not a player of the same caliber of Lamar Jackson. So why so much outrage directed at one and not the other? There's got to be a reason more people want to see Lamar, and to a lesser extent Jalen, and to a much greater extent than both, Cam, taking down a peg on a national platform. Do I really got to say what it is? It's the same reason why people like Michael Wilbon can stand up on their soapbox and poke their chest out about how they forbade their child from buying a Ja Morant jersey, but then turn around and give little beyond lip service to the NBA's IPV problem. It's the reason why people regularly complained about people like Bomani Jones and Jamel Hill using their platform to draw attention to very real social issues within and around major sports leagues. But not Jason Whitlock, who's practically made a career out of being a contrarian, even in his ESPN and FS1 days. Shut up and dribble only applies when you don't like what's being said or who's saying it. That's my point. For y'all that don't know, which if you don't, I genuinely don't know how you made it this far into the video, Stephen A. Smith started out as your dime a dozen sports writer, actually nearly catching a fade from some of AI's henchmen back in the day when he worked for the Inquirer. Point being, Steve has always been a pot stirrer for, let's just keep it at that. Which, I mean, most sports writers are, to be honest. But during the early 2000s, his inflammatory delivery was what got him a recurring spot on ESPN's network of shows, and even his own short-lived one at one point. His blunt, some would say abrasive style is what made Skip Bayless, the father of the Embrace Debate format, handpick Steve to be his foil on First Take. And Steve has just become even more and more of a cartoon since then, to the point that regular sports watchers don't really take he or his revolving door of guest panelists all that seriously. It's like the Today Show, but for sports talk. It's just something you have playing in the background to get you up to speed on the news of the day while you get the kids ready for the bus. And one of the main reasons is because of stuff like this.
Let me say this, y'all. The question is, are the Ravens getting their money's worth on Lamar Jackson?
No.
The answer is no.
The
answer is no.
Lamar Jackson has to make sure, because we all know he's worth his money because he's box office. You walk through the turnstiles to see him. So I don't know what this debate was about whether or not he's worth his money. Of course he's worth his money.
Playing both sides, shit that I don't like.
Now, for y'all that may not know this, since Skip left, First Take is Stephen A's show. Everything from the guests to the topics that are discussed that day have to go through him before they appear on TV. Even the perpetual Cowboys pandering. That's the thing. As much as Steve talks about how he hates the Cowboys and hates their fans, he knows TV. And he knows, love them or hate them, the casual sports watcher is going to always tune into some Cowboys talk. Same deal with Lamar. They wouldn't go out of their way to pick Lamar apart if there wasn't a market for it. In a similar way as Cam before him, people plot on Lamar's downfall for no reason than because he's Lamar. And dudes like Steve, like Acho, and even Shannon, and a bunch of others ride that wave of hate straight to the bank. Remember a few months ago when ESPN spent the whole day trying to clown on Cam for his game manager take?
Managers. Brock Purdy, Tua Tagovailoa, Jared Goff, and really, Dak Prescott. These are game managers. They're not difference makers.
And when you say game manager, I'm not asking you to go out and win the game. I'm just asking you not to lose.
Not to lose the game. Listen, motherfucker, I don't give a damn what you do. You don't have to score every time. You just don't have to throw a pick every time either. If we're going to really call a spade, a game manager is different than a game changer.
I'm just so, honestly, move past the outfit for a second. He literally said, in the year of 2023, where it's all about NFL backups, where is Cam? Not on an NFL roster, right? So he's talking about all these NFL game managers. He sounds like the people literally tweeting at me from their basement, get back in the kitchen. It's like you are at home watching me. Just turn the TV off.
Probably in the kitchen.
It just sounds so...
Well, aside from him being right, and basically anybody who knows ball knowing he was right, and the end of the season unfolding in a way that basically proved he was right, he got dragged on national TV by supposed professionals for having an opinion that ultimately just was that. An opinion. All the while, ESPN was paying Aaron Rodgers to vomit his anti-vax skullduggery on a weekly basis, despite Aaron taking a pay cut to play for the New York Johnson & Johnsons. Jesus, I'm so ready for this man to retire. But that's the thing, isn't it? Most of us aren't really aware of our implicit biases until we're forced to face them straight up. Most of us have a level of privilege that allows us to ignore them, and even more so the people impacted by them. So even if we're not offended by the black quarterback or a stereotypically black style of quarterbacking, we may find ourselves discomfited when the black quarterback uses their platform for a cause greater than the sport itself. A cause that frankly most of us don't want to acknowledge, let alone address, because it is so butt ugly. Alright, so I'm not going to waste time debating the sincerity of Cap's protest because Flimlo Raps already did that video. I'm also not going to waste time talking about whether or not I think he kind of lost the plot in the process because, again, Flim did that video. But my point in bringing Cap up is, regardless of what you may think about his motives, his sincerity, or even his actual merits as a player, the fact of the matter is, at least a third of viewers got so in their feelings that they just stopped watching. And I mean, this is the NFL, so it wasn't really going to impact their bottom line all that much anyway. But what does it say about the fan base that the instant reaction to a black man using his platform to peacefully draw attention to the oft-ignored, underreported, and very, very well documented epidemic of police brutality against POCs was to stop watching their favorite sport altogether?
Okay, so at one point I did consider redoing this whole section, but I didn't because, F y'all. But doing a little bit more digging, it would appear that not nearly as many people who said they did actually stopped watching football when Cap was doing his whole give us free thing. Matter of fact, the so-called hardcore fans were more likely to oppose the then incumbent Mr. MAGA than support him. What that has to do with niggas getting shot by the cops, I don't know. But evidently protecting unarmed civilians from John McClane ripoffs is a political thing now. Whatever. In fact, since 2016, about half of NFL fans have changed their minds about Cap's stance on the anthem, with only 11% saying they would stop watching if it happened again today, as opposed to 28% back then. I mean, it did only take like 11 more people dying and the entire world calling them out for being dickheads to come around, but that's privilege for you. Having the entire rest of the world hand deliver a special invitation to the Empathy Olympics, and you get the gold medal for just choosing to participate this time. Yes, the irony is not lost on me at all.
Again, we're not having the police kill more white people than black people discussion on this video because, one, yeah, they kind of do, but also they don't, but kind of, yeah, they do. And that's kind of why you should care in the first place, dum-dum. And two, that's aside from the point. Again, Aaron Rodgers can use his platform to parrot his anti-vax goofery, and we just make drunk uncle jokes about it. Nick Bosa tweets like he's Nick Fuentes, and we all just look the other way. Riley Cooper literally dropped a hard R on camera, and the only thing people talked about was how Mike Vick defended his fourth string slot receiver. And just to let you know that this goes both ways, how many high profile players in the last like 5 years have been caught, not accused of, but recorded and or convicted of committing violence against weaker partners? And we either forget about it or just learn to live with the fact that they did it because man throw ball, man catch ball, run, score, touchdown, yay! I mean, Tyreek Hill is just one of the players that has been caught physically and emotionally abusing a partner, and yet he never received any discipline from the league for that incident. And more importantly, for the context of this video, is and has been one of the most popular and recognizable stars in the league over the past like half decade or more, actually. Like, I remember when Dante Stallworth literally killed a guy. Do y'all remember that? Better yet, literally a college class worth of women accused Deshaun Watson of sexual assault before he eventually settled out of court with most of them, and never did he once show any sort of remorse or accountability for it. 30? I don't care what y'all have to say. You don't get that much smoke without there being a fire somewhere. And this nigga got a whole fan base caping for his crimes until he started playing like the doo-doo stain that he is. There's never been a more appropriate uniform now, has there? Remind me again, what exactly did Cap do that was so morally or legally wrong for so many folk to treat him with a level of disgust I hadn't seen since Vic got out of jail? You know what he did, nigga. He forgot his place. And that's what I'm getting at here, folks. As much as we want to deny the racialized dynamic of pro sports, for a lot of people, these games are basically the modern equivalent of a Mandingo fight. They love the idea of black bodies being used as proxies to exercise interstate and crosstown rivalries. And this is especially true at the college level. Like, the Kansas-Missouri rivalry is literally spawned from the pre-Civil War conflict between pro and anti-slavery factions on the Kansas-Missouri border. They know they'll never be able to out-athlete the athlete, but they can still exercise dominance by claiming a form of ownership over their bodies by virtue of their fandom. That's all these players are to these folks, objects to be exploited for their own pleasure. Therefore, when the object exercises autonomy, the owner acts accordingly. How dare you disrupt my entertainment by forcing me to pay attention to social issues that I don't care enough about to acknowledge otherwise? But I can't say that part out loud or they might clock me as the racist dickhole that I am. So shut up and dribble becomes respect the flag, support the troops, and a bunch of other garbage that had literally nothing to do with what Cap was protesting against in the first place. This is the plight of the black athlete. Your body, your thoughts even are not your own. You serve one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to entertain a predominantly white fan base and make predominantly white and male coaches, GMs, and owners goofy rich, literally off your back, and I guess your arm in this instance, and your legs, and your butt if you're Jalen Hurts. But y'all get my point. Growing up a part-time Eagles fan, I remember when Donovan McNabb said the quiet part out loud about how the fan base expected him to run because he was black and thought he didn't have the ability to rely solely on his arm. Now, regardless of whether McNabb should have used his legs a little more, which he most definitely should have, just the suggestion that the backlash he received was based in any part on his blackness warranted backlash itself. The most scathing of which actually came from black people, believe it or not.
For a whole lot of years now, we've heard you crying aloud about being taken seriously as a black quarterback who can camp out in the pocket, say like a Doug Williams. One thing is certain, Donovan E. McNabb, you're no Doug Williams. This whole dismal season so far has really been a testament of fallen dreams and lost opportunities, most of which belongs at your feet, or should I say hands, and that of your coach, Andy Reid, who has allowed you to perpetuate a fraud on the field while hiding behind excuses, dripping in make-believe racial stereotypes. You are mediocre at best, and trying to disguise that fact behind some conceited reasoning that African-American quarterbacks who can scramble and who can run the ball are somehow lesser field generals is more insulting off the field than on. Your athleticism and unpredictability not only confuses defense, it also thrilled Eagles fans. But then you played the race card and practically all of us fell for your hustle. So for you to continue to deny we fans, as well as yourself, one of the strongest elements of your game by claiming that everybody expects black quarterbacks to scramble, not only amounts to a breach of faith, but also belittles the real struggles of black athletes who've had to overcome real racial stereotype casting in addition to downright segregation.
That's the insidious thing about anti-blackness. It's not just a white or even a non-black people thing. We living in a society that has literally been built on white supremacy, has white supremacy baked into its laws and its institutions, means that every one of us, black, white, and everything in between, are indoctrinated with some degree of anti-blackness from childhood. You ever heard the phrase, all skin folk ain't kinfolk? Well, the reason that is whether purposefully or inadvertently, a lot of us have capitalized on and even at times weaponized anti-blackness for our own ends. Think Steve Harvey and his regular rants against dreadheads, Monique and her anti-bonnet crusade, practically everything that comes out of Charleston White's mouth. That is the real black on black crime, and it happens all the time in the professional sphere. It's happened to me on several occasions. My point is that in the NFL especially, you're not allowed to defy your handlers, the direct or indirect ones. You're not allowed to go against the grain, to be your authentic self if and when that self is black as pitch. Again, that's the problem with Lamar. That was the problem with Cam. That's why Jalen comes off like a robot pre-programmed to do nothing but play ball and regurgitate wiki quotes. But if you've ever seen him actually interact with his teammates, you know that what we see at the podium is not the full picture.
It was the craziest shit, bro. Swear to God, hey, on my mama, when I looked at AJ, bro, I saw you, bro, no cap. Number 11. Hey, when I seen you running, swear to God, bro, I saw Julio Jones. I saw the number 11. I saw you driving your knees, bro. You look so tall. Like that shit was weird. That shit was so crazy.
Man, what's happening, man?
Hey, let's do it, man. Hey.
Boy.
Man, let's do it, man.
Say no more.
It's a defense mechanism, likely something that he picked up or even more likely learned from his father growing up a high-profile black athlete in Texas to dissuade anti-black backlash for rubbing the wrong people the wrong way. Blackness, especially unapologetic blackness, is just not quarterbacky enough for some people. Remember everything I said earlier about the bias held against dual threats? Here's the thing, y'all. Virtually all college QBs these days, they all come from some version of a spread or an RPO scheme, even going back to their high school days. That's just how evolution works. All the reasons I gave for why dual threats can struggle in the league are the reasons why traditional pocket passing prospects, even generational ones like Trevor Lawrence, for example, do. Coaching. These kids aren't being taught the skills they need to succeed at the pro level because that's not their coaches' jobs. Their job is to win games and to use your kid's body to do so, even at the expense of that kid. So let's go back to Jalen for a bit. The biggest knock on him coming out of college was his throwing ability, his accuracy specifically. Matter of fact, that's the reason he was benched in the national title game and we all learned how to pronounce Tagovailoa. The thing is, I can't tell you what Saban or Riley thought about Jalen's potential as a pure passer, but I can tell you that being a pure pocket passer was not why Jalen was recruited in the first place. It was his dual threat, i.e. athletic ability. The thing is, depending on how big a business it is for your school, your state, your league, whatever, the less coaching becomes about teaching and the more it becomes about winning. So if the difference between my job and unemployment is deciding whether to prioritize teaching you how to diagnose coverages and keeping the rich a-holes in the club boxes happy, chances are I'm going to do the latter. My point is, what incentive did Saban or his staff have to teach Jalen the skills he would need to succeed at the next level when they literally had Tua waiting to get his number called anyway? And what makes it even more wild is that schools like Bama, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, etc. use their national notoriety as a recruiting tool, knowing at least to some degree that they either don't have the resources or perhaps even worse, just won't use those resources to coach these kids up to as close to pro readiness as possible. Yeah, come to Oregon, kid, where you'll have a national TV slot every week to show off your skills to those scouts at the pros. You'll also get 24 different uniform combos directly from our corporate sponsor, Nike. And we'll still be able to complain about Colorado stealing all of the spotlight from us because they're just playing for clicks and clout while we're playing for the same thing. Just don't tell anybody that. Jameis Winston, who some of y'all might have already mentioned in the comments to rebut my point about Manziel and Mayfield, had a number of different incidents during the course of his college career, including being accused of raping a female co-ed. Charges were eventually dropped after both the NCAA and Tallahassee police concluded there wasn't enough evidence to charge Winston, but I bet that's not the thing y'all remember most about his college escapades.
We now have surveillance video showing Heisman Trophy winner Jameis Winston casually walking out of a grocery store with crab legs. He walks out with about $32 worth of crab legs and crawfish without paying. Winston later admitted to walking out of the store without paying and has already served several hours of community service. In the video, you also see Winston following a security guard out of the store.
Yeah, it's between this and the thing that I can't say because my daughter is right over there staring at me for some reason. Yes. It's between one of these two incidents that did the most damage to his public profile because that's practically all you heard about leading up to the draft. Not a possible sexual assault, mind you, but him being gullible enough to think his shelf stocker homie at Publix had the clout to just let him walk out the store with a whole crab boil and yeah, just being a stupid college kid. These two incidents, more than any other, made Jameis immature, irresponsible, unprofessional, all things that conventional wisdom says you can't be as an NFL quarterback. But what he did have was gobs of physical talent. So much so that no matter how immature he was, you just couldn't pass up on the opportunity to see what he could do when given the keys to an NFL franchise. The problem is, even going back to college, no one really took the initiative to pull Jameis to the side and rein in his bad habits, both on and off the field. Remember the crab leg incident? Yeah, Jameis only got a half-game suspension for that. Now, the argument can be made that perhaps he was just a little too important to be punished that harshly, but that's kind of the point that I'm getting at, right? Again, when you play pro ball or play for a college program that's worth as much as a pro team, winning is all that really matters. So whatever I got to do to get you on the field as soon as possible, I'm going to do that, even at the expense of your own maturation.
All right, so I'm not going to lie to y'all. Originally, I didn't do too much research on the Winston thing. I just kind of assumed that I knew what I was talking about. But hey, that just makes me a garden variety video essayist now, doesn't it? So apparently, Winston actually did get suspended for a full game, I guess, after a bunch of outside pressure on the team for how bad a look it was. And technically, it wasn't for the crab legs thing. It was for the actual sexual assault allegation. Or rather, it was that being the final straw on top of all of his past headassery, including the crab legs thing. So, yeah, there you have it.
Again, we're talking about literal kids at the college level and just abouts in the pros. Rarely do you see coaches taking the time of day to instill these kids with worldly wisdom, because that's not really their job. If you want a perfect example of this, just go look up how ratchet that Gators national championship team was that I mentioned earlier. And then maybe Urban's first year in Jacksonville might make a lot more sense. Again, pro sports is a business above all else. Businesses can't afford to wait for you to realize your potential or to grow up. But what they can do is find a way to benefit from your skill set right now before it's all used up. The 90s is really when the dual threat started to be accepted by mainstream football heads as a viable play style for black quarterbacks. If for no other reason than because, Randall freaking Cunningham, everybody. The issue is very few people were willing to give them a chance to develop a more nuanced game, opting instead to make use of their athletic ability while there was still tread left on the tires. See, that's the wild thing about all this. You can dislike a thing and learn to tolerate it. You can even learn to praise it at some point, so long as you can see the benefit of it. That's what happened with dual threats, in some ways to their detriment. By the mid-2010s, signal callers like Russell Wilson, RG3, Cap, Cam, and even Tom Tebow had taken the league by storm, thanks in large part to the integration of RPO packages into pro playbooks. Remember that one year when that was basically the only thing Miami did because they didn't really have a quarterback worth quarterbacking? The problem is, again, everyone in the NFL is fast. And y'all know what happens when two objects moving at incredibly high speeds collide with each other.
Hot Wheels, crisscross crash!
If I didn't mention before, that is the main issue with basing your entire O around RPO. QBs, both in the context of the game and literally the number on their bank statements, are just way too valuable to risk getting hit that hard that often. Even if they manage to make it through the game without some catastrophic injury, that wear and tear is going to take its toll over the course of a game, the course of a season, a career even. This is ultimately what ended the careers of folks like Dante Culpepper and, again, Cam Newton. Their bodies had just been through so much, both on and off the field in Cam's case, that they just weren't able to hold up anymore. A much better example of this would be RG3, who won Offensive Rookie of the Year and led the Washington No-Names to a division title in that same year, largely due to his dynamic running ability. In that same year, he suffered one of the more gruesome-looking leg injuries you'll see in the modern game, which was later revealed to be an LCL sprain, which is not as bad as it looked, but still, it's a leg injury. Despite Griffin clearly being hobbled, then Washington coach Mike Shanahan sent Griffin back in the game after only one play out. After missing the next week, Griffin returned in week 16 and then started in Washington's playoff game against Seattle. He was visibly limited due to his prior injury, but insisted that he stay in the game until that same leg literally folded in on itself on a non-contact injury. Again, for those of y'all who've never played ball, non-contact injuries are usually the worst, especially for your long-term prospects. Griffin was never the same player again, and to this day, people still debate whether the blame should be placed on him or Shanahan or a combination. But what we wound up learning in the future was that Shanahan actually lied about Griffin being cleared to go back into the game where he got the initial sprain, and that the rift in his relationship with his star QB was due at least in part to Griffin, most likely acting as a mouthpiece for ownership, telling Shanahan what plays were and weren't acceptable to be called, considering Griffin's long-term future. And that might actually be the best thing that Dan Snyder has ever done for Washington. Well, I mean, aside from sell the team, that is. That's the thing, though. Going back to Jalen Hurts, he made himself into the quarterback most people, myself included, didn't think that he could become coming out of college. We heard all throughout the 21 season about how his legs wouldn't be able to save him once he had to play an honest-to-God good defense again. And yeah, he did look like a virgin in a sex shop during that Tampa game. And for at least half the offseason, all we heard about was how weak his arm was, his inaccuracy, his slow processing speed. The fact that Jalen hadn't developed into a top-tier pro quarterback was in one way or many due to his own lack of ability. But then 2022 happened.
4th and 7. Hurts lofts to Smith. It's a touchdown. Devontae Smith.
2nd and 10. Oh boy, deep ball is, and it is caught for the touchdown.
As all day, loaded up, taking a shot. He's got it. Touchdown.
Head on yourself. As Hurts going down the field, get it. Yes, they can. A.J. Brown.
I don't get it twisted now. Jalen wouldn't have gotten to that point if he didn't have the backing of an organization willing to tune out all the noise and believe in him enough to be that guy, or at least when they barely missed out on getting either of these two. There is, in fact, a God, people. But my point is, Jalen didn't get here by accident. He made himself into the guy the world said he could never be. And based on the returns we have now, the only reason he wouldn't have been is because we never gave him a chance to be more than what he already was. Which now brings us to the man that I know a lot of y'all have been waiting for. Mike Vick is the reason that I love football, if you haven't been able to tell already. Like, I would not have ever even thought about watching the game, let alone putting pads on myself, if it were not for Vic. He moved like a basketball player on bluegrass, or turf, I guess, since this is the Georgia Dome after all. Like, I remember a girl that I dated in college. She didn't know the difference between first down and first quarter, but she could most definitely tell you about this play here.
The 30. Inside the 20, into the end zone, Falcons win.
Like, that's some straight up Looney Tunes stuff going on the football field. Because I'm not quite old enough to have seen Randall in his prime, I hadn't seen an athlete that electrifying since ever. In my opinion, Vic's career encapsulates the evolution of the black quarterback in the NFL. Vic was the first overall pick in the 2001 draft, making him the first quarterback to be so. But just as important, in my opinion, is Vic was the first true dual threat to be taken first overall, marking a shift in philosophy within the league. Remember, old-timey football knowledge said you can't win with a running quarterback, or at least not one whose running ability is just as important to his game as passing. I think this philosophy changed largely because of guys like Randall and Cordell, and also Steve Young, although I think Young's running ability was more complementary than a primary component to his game, but y'all get where I'm going here. Point is, Atlanta saw the future. And the future was a guy who could get you 2,000 yards through the air and another 1,000 on the ground, which Vic did, becoming the first QB to do so in 2006. Now, granted, 2,000 passing yards today sounds like the first half of a Dolphins game, but remember what era of football we're talking about here.
Throws middle, what a shot by Lewis.
Yeah, exactly. Vic became a superstar on par with those in the NBA in the early aughts because of his electrifying style of play. But it was that style of play that drew so much criticism from the old-timey football heads again. Again, he was a fun player to watch, but you probably couldn't actually win a chip with him because he didn't play the right way. On top of his play style, the unapologetic blackness with which Vic carried himself rubbed a lot of folk the wrong way. But going back to Vic's play style, in his Atlanta years, Vic was never what you would call a prolific passer of the football. Partly because he never really had anyone to throw to besides Algie Crumpler and a very, very young Roddy White, but mainly because he honestly wasn't all that great at it. I mean, even by mid-aught standards, that passer rating is straight up abysmal. But remember what I said earlier about coaching? Now, I can't confirm this because I couldn't find the story to validate it, so it might just be the inner machinations of my mind telling me this, but I feel like I heard in one place or another Vic say that he didn't really know how to play the position at a pro level until he got to Philly and played for this guy. Yeah, everybody calls Bruce Arians the QB whisperer, or at least they did until he retired, but for my money, it's Big Red. Andy made starting caliber QBs out of Kevin Cobb and the reanimated corpse of Jeff Garcia, remember? Mahomes said himself that he didn't really know how to read coverages until he played for Reed. So what I'm saying is the evidence kind of speaks for itself. Probably Reed's greatest project, besides Mahomes obviously, was turning Vic into the cannon arm tailback that he was in Atlanta into the ultimate football weapon in Philadelphia. Well, for a season and a half at least. Point being, once he got the tutelage he needed, instead of just being told to do what he was already good at, but just more of it, he was able to realize his potential, which again, a lot of athletic quarterbacks like Justin Fields, for example, aren't really given the chance to do. There's a reason why folks in Philly to this day still wonder what Mike would have been had he played for Reed in his early years. Yeah, it basically would have been this. But all that being said, we of course have to come back to why Mike even came to Philly in the first place.
Now out of federal prison in Kansas, Michael Vick is coming here to his home in Hampton, Virginia, where he'll try to pick up the pieces and rebuild his life. But first, Vick will have to make it through this gauntlet of media waiting for his return. The disgraced NFL star suffered one of the most astonishing falls in sports history when he was sentenced to 23 months in prison for operating a dogfighting ring 2 years ago. Vick hopes to return to the National Football League, but still has to serve 2 months of home confinement.
But I will preface this section by saying I in no way condone or am trying to justify any of Mike's actions. So fall back. I love animals. Still going to eat them though. That said, because this video is sociological in nature, I kind of have to talk about the societal factors at play with this thing to contextualize it. And as someone who pretty much grew up with dogs and like a degree or two of separation away from dog fights, when I first heard about Vic's arrest, my instant gut reaction was, this gotta be some white people shit. What's the big deal? Again, I'm by no means trying to justify this, but you gotta understand the sociological context of dog fights to understand why Vic would even finance, let alone participate in such a venture. See, dogfighting in a lot of working and lower class communities in America, especially in the South, is just part of the culture. It's honestly not too dissimilar from bull and cockfighting in the cultures that practice them. Dog fights are a lot like chicken and watermelon. Don't worry, I am going somewhere with this. I'm not Michael Rappaport. Practically everybody in the South eats chicken and watermelon, especially if you're poor. Reason being because chicken and watermelon are historically some of the most accessible food items to poor and enslaved people, and because of a combination of a disproportionate number of poor folk being black and also anti-blackness, middle and upper class white people forgot all about the poor part and just started associating black folks, regardless of status, with watermelon and chicken. Same with dog fighting. Dogfighting in some ways is a rite of passage for young working class men of Southern descent, including those of us whose folks came north during the first and second Great Migrations, like my grandparents did. In a study published in the Journal of Animal and Natural Resource Law, the results found that what attracted dog fighters was the ability to express traditional traits of masculinity, such as aggression, strength, and competitiveness, that they lacked the ability to otherwise. Yeah, y'all see how this thing is just coming full circle, right? The study theorized that working class men with limited opportunities to attain status and the admiration of their peers as compared to middle and upper class men saw dogfighting as a means to do so, not only metaphorically, but literally, in how much money they could earn through dogfighting. This theory was pretty much confirmed when the study found that the vast majority of men they interviewed came from working class backgrounds. My point being, dogfighting is not a black thing. It's not even a gang thing or even a Southern thing exclusively. It's a poor people thing. And again, when you know Mike's background, the stars begin to align in a way that probably didn't beforehand, right? Matter of fact, this was exactly the defense that one of the co-defendant's lawyers gave at his sentencing. Again, this isn't me saying that that makes it right what he did, but it is to say that condemning Mike the way folks did without knowing or wanting to know the full context is short-sighted at best and full-on anti-black at worst.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I grew up under that. So like, I grew up seeing that, grew up watching it. So it just never, like, I still had the hood in me.
You're right.
I still had the hood in me, and it's like, yo, we're gonna stay true to our roots.
Mike, you worked your ass off. You had a lot of homeboys that didn't work as hard as you and stayed there. You worked your ass off to leave there in order to just to go back.
Yeah, but nobody never
to visit.
Nobody never went to prison though.
You didn't think?
Yeah, so I'm like,
I know about.
you know,
I'm from a small town in the South.
Yeah,
and I know about dog
so
fighting.
You can relate, yeah.
But I had never heard of anybody going to jail either.
Me neither. So so that's why I was like, so I didn't go to prison for that.
Right.
You know, I went to prison for interstate commerce.
Right.
Which was kind of confusing. Like, damn, okay. So laws and rules had to be changed in order to make it so that But look, that's water under the bridge.
Right.
Got a documentary coming out to talk about it all,
okay.
And just kind of clearing the air on
right.
The big misconceptions and the way I'm perceived.
All right, so this is a pretty unnecessary post-editor's note here, but it's a very common misconception that Mike went to jail for fighting dogs. And I don't know if y'all caught what he was saying there, but what Mike actually went to jail for was transporting dogs across interstate lines for the purposes of dog fights or whatever. Point being that they literally created an entirely new law for the purpose of indicting him. So yeah, like I said, they were just trying to make an example out of him because, white people.
But also, I think we have to go back to what I said earlier about dogfighting being a gang thing. That, I think, is a big reason why Mike was such a pariah, even after Andy and the league gave him another chance. To the cul-de-sac dweller, dogfights conjure images of an abandoned row home basement filled with clouds of cannabis and scantily clad, well-endowed women, alongside a host of gold-toothed, do-rag and white tee-wearing ne'er-do-wells holding racks of unmarked $20 bills in their hands while they bark back and forth at each other and their snarling, blood-drunk pit bulls until one of them emerges victorious. But it is actually not that far from the truth, to be honest. Point I'm getting at is, When most people hear dog fighting or even just pit bull, they hear criminal or gang activity. And when they hear gang activity, they see black and brown. What I'm getting at is Vic was punished by the court of public opinion as much for his crimes as for what those crimes are associated with. As a black person who works in a white collar environment, I can tell you that many, if not most of us, have to make certain concessions in order to assimilate into such an environment. Because wherever you go, whether public or private sector, you're likely going to be in a predominantly white, oftentimes male environment. Even when we do keep our dreads, bantus, and wooden hoop earrings, we still have to tailor our blackness in a way that is tolerable to our non-black peers. And if you've worked in some of the places I have, even when the space is majority black, the sensibility there is very much socially conservative, at least relative to black identity, that is. What I mean is, yeah, you can feel free to attend the BLM protest on your lunch break, and you might actually fulfill your mandated community service hours by doing so, depending on what kind of job you have. You can even wear your trademark Rosa Parks Nah t-shirt on Casual Friday. But if the warehouse decides to stage a sit-in for a pay raise and your black behind is caught anywhere near that, yeah, you can pack your bags and take your black radicalism to the unemployment line, bucko. The kind of black identity politics expressed in professional environments is most times superficial at best. But that's because it has to be in order for us to keep the job in the first place. Thus, many of us are stuck between the rock and stone cold of acquiescing just enough of our personal politics to remain in these positions of relative power and privilege, while not sacrificing so much as to assimilate completely. And this is the fundamental flaw with the black excellence narrative that I talked about a bunch of times now, so I won't do it again. This video exists. We're expected to be representatives of the culture in spaces that are historically antagonistic to blackness. Logic being, the more of us beating the path, the more of us will be able to follow behind and in the process liberate us all. The problem is the sacrifices we have to make just to get in those spaces to begin with compromises the kind of radical black politic it would actually take to change those places for all of us to be active participants in them. Like, as relatively liberal as my current workplace is, there's a reason I don't tell anybody about my second source of income, even the black people. Because I know something I said on this channel is going to rub somebody in that office the wrong way. Somebody who, even if not now, is probably going to have some kind of influence on my career trajectory in the future. And this is why I keep saying that people like me should not and cannot be treated as thought leaders or spokespeople for the culture. And neither should black quarterbacks or any black celebrity for that matter. QBs, because of their prominence, thanks in large part to those rule changes I mentioned earlier, are literally the faces of most NFL franchises. They are the upper class of the NFL. Even barely above average QBs are often the most recognizable faces on their team. They're on all the marketing materials, the merchandising, even the side of the actual stadiums. And in a league like the NFL, where most fans can't see the actual faces of most players on game day, that 30-second State Farm ad is the difference between being a household name and just another cog in the machine. But you see, it's that inordinate amount of fame and glory that fundamentally disconnects most QBs from the player base as a whole. To put it frankly, they're just way too rich and famous to identify with the average journeyman or practice squad player, just trying to make a roster and get a game day check. I'm so sick of being right, I swear. This, again, is the fundamental flaw with black elitism. If people like Jay and Bay or Steve or Rihanna were to use the power their platform affords them to even promote the kind of societal change necessary for wholesale black liberation, it would decimate their bottom line. And they know this. And if they don't, it's because their wealth has blinded them to that fact. I'll talk about this more in another video that I have dropping toward the middle half of the year. But black athletes, for the most part, are just fundamentally disconnected from the black body politic as a whole. Thus, many, if not most, are simply unwilling to use their platform to advocate for the kind of societal change that we truly need for wholesale black liberation. Quite simply, they have far too much to lose in doing so. So yeah, sure, you can go ahead and print Black Lives Matters on the back of my game day jersey. We'll even call off one game on the day of yet another instance of racially motivated police brutality. But canceling the rest of the season, including the playoffs, and missing out on all of those game day checks, yeah, that's a bridge too far for my radicalism, bucko. And again, this is the NBA we're talking about. Probably the most faux progressive sports league in the world right now. How do you think that will fly in the NFL? Nigga, do you not remember what happened to Colin? And yeah, I know some of y'all probably sitting there wondering why I'm treating this nigga Cap like he's the second coming of Fred Hampton or something. But that's because that's the way the league, and more importantly, the league's fan base treated him and still treats him, even though he doesn't play anymore. Now imagine if somebody like Arian Foster, one of the most vocal and politically and socially conscious players I can remember from the last decade or so, was a quarterback. If y'all can remember Josh Rosen, basically that, but much, much worse because he is black. He wouldn't even get a chance to succeed for no reason than refusing to comply with the way that things were. We are generations removed from people like Ali Abdul-Jabbar and Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf using their celebrity as a vehicle for wholesale black liberation. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but the closest thing we've had to that in recent years is... So yeah, y'all starting to see the problem now, right? It's just not practical to expect elites to go against their own personal interests, even if for the good of the collective. But with all of that said, we got to ask ourselves, is it really fair to pile on Jalen, Lamar, Geno, or any other black quarterback for not going full give us free mode? Like, if you were in their positions, would you really be willing to sacrifice thousands of hours that you dedicated since you were literally a child toward fulfilling not only a dream, but attaining generational wealth for you and your family? Honestly, I don't know that I would. Which is exactly why it shouldn't be left to not just elites, but prominent black figures, period, to start, let alone lead the revolution to begin with. Additionally, we need to stop using the success of a few as a metric for how far the whole has come. Yes, it's great, even historic, that more black faces are being allowed into places of social and fiscal elitism, but that's the catch, isn't it? Allowed. And who exactly is it that's allowing them there in the first place? And perhaps more important than that, what did they have to sacrifice to get there? Because I can all but guarantee you that they had to give up something. Listen, my point isn't to lambast black professionals. Like I said, I am one. It's not even to lambast black celebrities. That is until those celebrities use black liberation as an aesthetic for profit and then do the exact opposite of what that aesthetic represents in the first place. But it is to say the same thing that I've been saying for the past like 3 or 4 videos now. That Superman ain't coming, and he never was. Listen, as much as I try to be as radical as possible, YouTube is only going to allow me to go so far. And like I said before, that's the catch. It allows me. So even just getting this video out to you meant I had to make compromises to my own personal politics just for you to get a bit of the message. 9 out of 10 times I have to go through a first, second, sometimes even a third draft before I feel like the script is YouTube ready. And half the time it still isn't. Not too long ago, another prominent creator of color made a video calling out folks like myself and my peers, the so-called black thought leaders of YouTube. And Jesus Christ, that's the problem, isn't it? Like, I'm not even going to cap with y'all. I didn't even watch the John, so I don't even know what they had to say or who was even included in it. But just the idea of somebody like me or people of my ilk being thought to be a thought leader of any kind, like, this is not, it's genuinely funny to me. I'm cracking up right now. That's part of the problem, honestly. I see at least a handful of tweets every month lambasting content creators for their lack of direct action. I mean, bet. I agree wholeheartedly, actually. And honestly, I would be doing this with or without YouTube anyway, but I try as best as I can to be the exception to that. But the reality is, even the little bit of action I am able to do is funded, at least in part, by people who don't really want to hear me speak my full mind. Because I promise you, this channel is going to get all 3 strikes the same day, if that ever happens. Point I'm getting at is, it's y'all. Y'all in the trenches, y'all on the ground, y'all that's putting the work day in and day out in, who are the most directly impacted by the things creators like myself talk about. Y'all are the leaders that we need. Not a nigga in front of a camera with a throwback jersey on. Because as much as I try to be, and y'all allow me to be a mouthpiece for y'all's thoughts, stone cold reality is the same folk that y'all are fighting up against are the same niggas sending me those AdSense checks every month. And I thank God for them.
What's up with what's going down in every city and every town? Fuck Trump! Wait, is the plan. They've got us in the palm of their hand. We pretend that we're dead. We pretend that we're dead. They can't hear a word we said. We pretend that we're dead.